Chapter 10. Return to Sainte Marguerite.
During the days that followed, many strange things happened in Paris. On the first day, fresh food arrived in carts from different parts of the country. It was said that the king himself had paid for it. By that afternoon, all the hungry stomachs in Paris were filled, and there was a holiday atmosphere about the place. People were happy for the first time in years. They did not know the king had had a meeting with his ministers to talk about the war in the Netherlands, and that they had decided to make peace with Spain. Soon the soldiers would return to their farms, and no more money would be spent on guns and cannons. Another very strange thing happened that day. The king appeared in the streets of Paris, and instead of booing him and cursing him, the people cheered and shouted,
"Long live the king! Long live King Louis!"
The king was pleased to see them happy, and waved to them from his carriage. But that is not the strangest thing that happened that day. Instead of going straight to the palace, the king told his driver to take him to the Bastille. When he got there, he asked to see the head jailer. Gravier nearly fell to the ground when he saw the king enter the large hallway where the terrible fight had taken place just a few days earlier. The king, of course, knew the Bastille. He knew the smells and the cries of the prisoners. He also knew Gravier, who had hit him more than once, but he pretended to be meeting him for the first time.
"Monsieur Gravier," said the king.
Gravier was not the only one to wonder how the king knew his name, but kings know things that ordinary people do not.
"Monsieur Gravier, stand up where I can see you. I want you to take me to the cell of Captain d'Artagnan. I want him set free at once."
Gravier could hardly speak. His dirty grey moustache trembled, and his voice shook.
"But, Your Majesty, today he is to be executed as a traitor. Everything is ready."
"Just because everything is ready does not mean we must execute the man. Take me to him at once."
The king and his guards walked along the dark passages of the Bastille and came to where I was being kept. My cell door was opened, and the king himself came in and put his arms around me. Gravier nearly fainted when he saw how the king treated me. It was indeed a very strange day for the people of Paris, for all of France, and for me. After that, the king wanted to know about every man in the Bastille. By the end of that day, half of them had been released. The news spread fast, and everybody said that the king had changed. If only they knew how much. The king also gave orders that Porthos be taken to the palace and that the royal doctors take care of him until he was well again. That evening, the king held a small private party. At the party were Aramis, Athos, myself, and of course, Porthos, who was not able to move far from his bed. This, however, did not stop him from enjoying the rich food.
"What are your plans now, gentlemen?"
asked Philippe, who had dropped his role as king now that we were alone. Aramis was first to speak.
"I will serve my church and my king, as I have always done."
"In what order?"
said Philippe, sounding very much like a king.
"Now that you are king, Philippe, I will serve them equally, as it should be, I think."
"I will serve France in whatever way I can,"
said Athos.
"But first, I would like to spend some time on my farm. I need a rest after these last few weeks."
We looked at Porthos.
"Do you think she will still love me, Athos?"
"Who?"
said Athos.
"Marie, of course."
"It's been less than 2 weeks, Porthos. I'm sure she will still love you."
A look of joy spread over Porthos's face.
"Only Marie can make me well again."
We all laughed. Now it was my turn. The king looked at me, waiting to hear what I would say. "Your Majesty, I think you know my wishes." Philippe laughed and took me in his arms.
"You have my permission to marry Mademoiselle de la Vallière. If, of course, she wants to marry you."
If she wants me, that is the question.
"Will you continue to be captain of my guard, D'Artagnan?"
Well, I was hoping that...
All right, I understand. We shall deal with all this tomorrow at Versailles.
And Louis? I said. Philippe looked serious.
Ah, Louis. Yes, he is a problem. And he is also a risk to the throne, is he not?
He is, Your Majesty.
Yes, well, let me decide tomorrow when I really become King of France. Tonight I am just Philippe.
We cheered and shouted, "Long live Philippe!" A long night of food and laughter followed. It was another beautiful summer day as I walked down the steps into the garden of Versailles. I saw the king laughing with a group of ladies and some men. When I got closer, I saw that they were playing boule. The first thing I noticed was that Monsieur Colbert had taken Fouquet's place by the king's side. Fouquet had been arrested that morning and was waiting to be tried for stealing the king's taxes. Monsieur Colbert was now chief minister, and he looked very pleased with himself. I was back in my uniform, and for the time being at least, captain of the king's guard. When the king saw me, he called me over. He had promised that he would speak to Louise for me.
D'Artagnan, you know Louise de la Vallière, I think. And her mother too, I believe.
Ladies, good day to you. I stood waiting, as nervous as a young boy.
D'Artagnan, you are very quiet.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Well, I have good news for you. The Countess has agreed that you should marry her daughter, if that is what she wants. Louise, is it your wish?
I looked at Louise's beautiful face and felt that it could not be possible that she would want to marry me, an old soldier twice her age. Our eyes met. Did I see love there? I waited anxiously for her answer. No one breathed as we waited.
Yes, it is my wish.
There was a loud cheer from everybody.
You may kiss her, D'Artagnan. I will not mind.
I took her in my arms and kissed her.
That's enough, D'Artagnan, until after the wedding, which I think should be as soon as possible. By the way, how does Count D'Artagnan sound to you?
Your Majesty, there is no...
Oh, yes, there is. If you are going to marry a noblewoman, you must have a title. And land. So I have bought a little place for you both. Close by, since I will still need you to protect me from traitors, Count D'Artagnan.
There was another loud cheer.
By the way, Count, could you teach me how to play boule? I find I am no good at it at all.
There was another roar of laughter. I picked up the small wooden ball and threw it some distance. Well, Your Majesty, you take the ball like this and...
No, D'Artagnan. Let my wife show me.
He turned to Marie-Thérèse and handed her the ball. She looked at him with a smile, the first she had given her king in a very long time. I got off my horse and tied it to a tree. My companion got off his horse too and did the same. Then, both of us helped the third rider from his horse and took him towards a small rowing boat waiting on the river bank. The third rider had to be helped because he was wearing an iron mask, an ugly black iron mask with 2 holes for the eyes and a larger hole for the mouth. The man in the iron mask had said little during the journey. He was tired and not used to such harsh treatment. When we got into the boat, he said,
Where are you taking me, D'Artagnan?
To Sainte Marguerite, Your Majesty.
I have heard it is a truly terrible place.
I have heard the same, Your Majesty. My companion was rowing. When we had got about halfway to the island prison, Louis said,
I suppose there is no way I can persuade you to let me go, is there?
No, Your Majesty.
Do you really think my brother will be a better king?
I have to believe that, Your Majesty.
I think you may be making a serious mistake. He is just a country boy. What does he know about politics and government?
He will learn, At least he knows the needs of the people.
The needs of the people are not always the needs of the country.
I said nothing. We went through the iron gate into the cave, which Aramis had described to me. A voice came from behind the grille in the thick wooden door.
What is your business, officer?
A prisoner. The guard saw the man in the iron mask.
Not him again. And where is my friend Monsieur Fouquet?
In prison too, I said dryly.
Is that so? That's life, I suppose. One day at the palace, the next in prison.
The heavy wooden door was pulled open, and we went up the slippery steps until we came to the cell at the very top, with the window looking up to the endless blue sky. We could hear the sound of water and the lonely cry of the birds. In the corner was a bed of straw. As we were about to leave, Louis began to cry out.
You can't leave me! You can't leave me here! I am the King of France! D'Artagnan! My friend! My captain! You can't!
The guard looked at me and shrugged.
He's gone mad! Mad, mad, mad! They all go mad in the end.
As we rowed the boat back to the river bank, where we had left our horses, we could still hear Louis's cries echoing across the water. Athos and I looked at each other questioningly, but said nothing. King Louis XIV of France ruled for the next 48 years, to become one of the longest ruling kings ever. He wanted to make France great, and as a result sometimes made his people suffer. But in his heart he loved his people, and they loved him. Colbert was his chief minister for many of those years, and he tried to use the king's taxes in the best way possible. Fouquet died in prison some 10 years later. His land and houses were taken from him, sold, and the money given back to the people. As for myself, Louise and I are still in love. We have 4 children, all well and happy. I am no longer captain of the King's Guard, but I still spend a lot of time training young men who want to be part of the greatest group of men ever to have existed in France, the Musketeers. I teach them to fight with a sword and a musket, and above all, I teach them loyalty to their captain and their king. As for my 3 friends, Athos is still making cheese, Aramis is still praying, and Porthos is still getting fat. He did not stay with Marie for long. One woman was never enough for him. But his moustache is quite grey now, so perhaps he will soon find his true love and settle down to a quiet life. I doubt it, though.
An alternative ending. I expect you thought that was the end of The Man in the Iron Mask. D'Artagnan told a good story, didn't he? And we all like happy endings. But in real life, the ending is not often what we would like it to be. So, what really happened? Well, Philippe turned out to be very much like his brother. He was not a bad man, but when everybody thinks you are a god, you begin to believe it yourself, and you want to have everything, even the woman who is in love with your loyal captain of the Musketeers. Yes, you've guessed right. Philippe fell in love with Louise, just as his brother had done. When D'Artagnan realized that his life's dream was not going to come true after all, he asked the king if he could leave the palace. The king agreed, of course. He knew that things between them could never be the same again. But D'Artagnan was not like Athos, who was happy to spend the rest of his life on a farm. He wanted action, so he asked the king to make him chief of the Paris Musketeers. For the next 2 years he worked very hard to give Paris a human face. Then, one day in early summer, As he was leaving the building where he had his offices, a madman put a knife into his back, and he died 3 hours later. It was a sad end for one of the greatest swordsmen France has ever known. It was also one of the worst moments in the history, not only of Paris, but also of the whole of France. Louise, it is said, cried for a whole week. The people of Paris didn't smile for a month, and even the king was not himself for some time after the event. As for the others, well, Porthos went on enjoying life for a while, but rich food and late nights eventually had their effect on his health. He began to get pains in his legs, which gradually got worse until very soon he couldn't even walk. Having to stay in bed was a nightmare for Porthos. He woke up in a bad mood and went to sleep in a bad mood. It wasn't long before he lost all interest in life, and 2 months after D'Artagnan's tragic death, he fell asleep one night and never woke up. For a man who had always wanted to die fighting, it was a great tragedy indeed. Aramis, as leader of the French Jesuits, was a very powerful man, and it wasn't long before he and the king became enemies. The king was very much afraid of the power of the Jesuits, and Aramis did not agree with many of the things the king was doing, and so there was a lot of bad blood between them. In the end, Aramis died a bitter man, believing that he had not done all he could have done for France and its people, and that he had wasted his life. After D'Artagnan, Porthos and Aramis had died, Athos no longer left his farm, not even to go to the village. He spoke to no one except for his dogs. Some say he had never completely recovered from his son's death. Others say that he was sad that Philippe had not been a better king than his brother. However, there were days when he seemed to become young again. He would take his sword and go to the forest and fight with the trees. On these days, the servants at the house would hear him talking to himself and shouting the names D'Artagnan, Porthos, and Aramis, as he called out to the trees to put down their swords. He must have thought he was back with his old friends, fighting for freedom and justice. In the end, he went completely mad, and someone had to watch over him all the time. Then, one day, he just stopped eating, and soon after that, he also died. Perhaps I should not have told you this other ending to the story of the man in the iron mask. But the lives of others are just stories, and you don't have to believe them. You must choose which ending you want to believe. Think about it carefully before you decide. But I think I know which one you will choose. Am I right? The very end.